Commander stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance and watched the stars move past the ship. He had seen these same stars for 300 years. He had watched planets burn and civilizations fall. He had commanded fleets against enemies that would make most beings go mad with terror. In all that time, across all those battles, he had never once felt afraid. His body was made of living crystal, and it caught the light of distant suns as he turned to look at the data pad in his four-fingered hand. The report told him that 2 human soldiers would arrive today. They were the first of their kind to serve on a coalition warship. Did not think much of this news. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 15 years ago. To someone as old as, they were like children playing at being adults. The door behind him opened with a soft sound. Captain Axe walked in. He was tall and covered in thick gray scales. His yellow eyes looked worried. "The humans have arrived," Axe said. "The Council wants you to watch them. They want to know if humans can really fight alongside us." Made a sound that meant he understood. "Send them to me." A few minutes later, 2 humans walked onto the observation deck. Studied them with all 4 of his eyes. The first was a female. Her name tag said Lieutenant Morgan. She had reddish-brown hair tied back tight and green eyes that moved around the room, taking in every detail. She stood straight and still, like a soldier should. The second human was a male called Sergeant Danny Price. He was shorter and wider than the female. He had brown hair cut very short and a face that seemed to always be half smiling. While Morgan looked serious and ready, Danny Price looked like he had just walked into a party. "Welcome to the Eternal Vigilance," said. His voice was deep and sounded like stones grinding together. "I am Commander. I have been fighting in space since before your species learned to make fire. I will be watching you during this mission." Morgan saluted in the human way. "Thank you, Commander. We are honored to serve." Danny Price also saluted, but then he looked out at the stars and let out a low whistle. "Man, that view never gets old. Hey, Commander, do you ever just sit here and watch the stars go by? Because I could do that for hours." Did not know what to say. In all his years, no soldier had ever asked him such a question. He decided that humans were very strange creatures. Over the next few days, watched the humans closely. What he saw confused him. Morgan spent her free time learning about the ship and its crew. She asked questions about weapons, shields, and battle tactics. This was normal behavior for a soldier, but she also asked about the personal lives of the crew members. She learned their names, their home worlds, their families. She remembered small details and brought them up in later talks. Danny Price was even stranger. He spent most of his time in the ship's kitchen with a creature was a cook with 8 tentacles and no mouth. He communicated through colors that changed on his skin. Danny did not speak language and did not speak human, but somehow they became friends. Would find them together, Danny talking and waving his hands while flashed colors in response. They seemed to understand each other perfectly. "They form bonds too easily," told Captain Axe one evening. "They attach themselves to everyone they meet. When those beings die in battle, it will break the humans." Axe tilted his scaled head. "Perhaps, or perhaps the bonds make them fight harder." Did not believe that. He had lived long enough to know that caring about others was a weakness in war. 1 week into the mission, the ship received a distress signal. It came from a mining colony on a moon called 7. The colony had 2,000 workers from a dozen species. 3 days ago, they had stopped sending messages. The last transmission was just screaming and then silence. Called a meeting with his officers and the 2 humans. He showed them the data on the screen. Something attacked the colony. Scans show movement underground, but the readings make no sense. They do not match any known life form. Most of the officers looked worried. Mining colonies were usually safe places. Whatever could wipe out 2,000 people in just a few days had to be very dangerous. Morgan leaned forward and studied the screen. What were they mining? "Standard minerals," said. "Nothing special, But 3 days before they went silent, they reported finding an old structure deep underground. Very old. They were going to explore it. Danny Price leaned back in his chair. So they found something they should not have found, and now everyone is dead or missing. That sounds like every horror story I grew up with. Horror story? Axe asked. Tales we tell to scare each other, explained. Humans enjoy being frightened. It is strange, I know. Found this very hard to understand. His people had spent thousands of years trying to remove fear from their minds. Why would any species seek it out? We will arrive at 7 in 6 hours, he said. Prepare a landing team. I will lead it myself. As the meeting ended, notice something. While the other officers looked nervous or worried, the two humans looked calm, was already making notes about what equipment they would need. Danny was joking with a young officer about who would watch his plants if he did not come back. They were not pretending to be brave. They knew something bad waited for them on that moon. They knew they might die, and yet they acted like it was just another day, had fought beside hundreds of species over 3 centuries. He had never seen anything like this. He did not know it yet, but in a few short hours, these two small humans would teach him something that 300 years of war never had. They would show him what fear really meant. And for the first time in his very long life, Commander would be afraid. The landing ship touched down on 7 with a heavy thud. Was the first one out, his crystal body glowing faintly in the thin, gray light of the moon. Behind him came 14 soldiers from different species. Morgan and Danny Price walked together at the back of the group. The mining colony was a collection of metal buildings half buried in rock. Emergency lights blinked red through dirty windows. The air was cold and smelled like chemicals. Everything was silent. No machines running. No voices. Nothing. Spread out, ordered. Find survivors. The team moved into the main building. Inside, the walls were scratched and torn. Equipment lay broken on the floor. Dark stains covered everything. Had seen battlefields before. He knew what those stains were. A young soldier named pointed at something on the wall. Commander, look at this. Someone had written words in the dark stains. The message said, they come from the dark. Light hurts them. God help us. Felt something cold move through his crystal body. He knew those words. He had heard stories like this before, long ago. Stories from the Shadow Wars. Stories about an enemy that could not be killed. An enemy that ate minds and dissolved flesh. An enemy called the Shroud. That is not possible, he whispered. The Shroud have been gone for 1,000 years. What are the Shroud? Asked. She had moved up beside him, her green eyes reading the message on the wall. Before could answer, the lights went out. Complete darkness fell over them like a heavy blanket. Then the screaming started. It came from everywhere at once, high-pitched and terrible. Some of the soldiers fired their weapons, filling the dark with bright flashes of light. In those flashes, saw something that made his mind go blank with horror. Shadows were moving. Not the shadows of people or machines. The darkness itself was alive. It had shapes that hurt to look at. It had eyes that glowed with hungry light. It reached out with arms made of nothing, and where those arms touched, soldiers disappeared. Fall back, shouted. Everyone fall back. The team ran. They fired behind them as they moved, but the weapons did nothing. The Shroud absorbed the energy and kept coming. 2 soldiers vanished in the first seconds, then 3 more. Their screams cut off in ways that made want to cover his ears. Somehow they reached a room with power. The lights came on, harsh and bright. The Shroud stopped at the edge of the light. They circled there, pressing against the brightness like water against a wall. Counted the survivors. Of the 15 who had landed, only 9 remained. Some of the soldiers were crying. Others had curled into balls on the floor, shaking and whimpering. The Shroud were doing something to their minds. Could feel it too. A voice in his head telling him to give up. Telling him that the dark was peaceful. Telling him to step outside the light and let go. He pushed the voice away, but it took all his strength. He looked at his team. They were breaking. 300-year-old warriors were falling apart in front of him. Then he looked at the humans. Morgan was on one knee checking her weapon. Her hands were shaking slightly and her face was pale. She was afraid, could see it clearly, but she was still working. She was still thinking. Danny Price was next to a fallen soldier, a big-named who was clicking his mandibles in terror. Danny had his hand on his armored shoulder and was talking to him in a low, calm voice. Hey, look at me, Danny was saying. I know it is scary, I know, but we are going to be okay. You know why? Because I have been scared my whole life and I am still here. Being scared is not the end. It is just the beginning. Slowly stopped shaking. His large eyes focused on Danny's face. How do you do that? Asked. He did not mean to speak out loud, but the question came out anyway. Danny looked up at him. Do what? Function, you are clearly afraid. I can see your heart beating too fast. Your hands are wet with sweat. The shroud are calling to your mind just like they call to ours. But you keep moving, you keep fighting. How? Danny smiled. It was a strange thing to see in that moment, surrounded by darkness and death. Commander, where I come from, we have a saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. We do not ignore fear. We do not pretend it is not there. We just decide that something else matters more. Stood up and walked over to them. He is right. Humans have always been afraid. We are a small, soft species on a dangerous planet. We had to learn early that fear could not stop us from doing what needed to be done. If we let fear win, we would have died out long ago. The message said light hurts them, continued. She pulled out some tools from her pack. I am going to modify our weapons, make them produce more light. It might not kill the shroud, but it should slow them down. You can do that? Asked. I can try. That is all any of us can do. While worked, a door on the other side of the room opened. A group of survivors stumbled in. They were miners and scientists, maybe 30 of them. They looked terrible, thin, dirty, and scared beyond words. One of them, a female with silver fur, pushed to the front. Thank the stars, she said. I am Dr. Myra. We thought no one would come. What happened here? Asked. Dr. Myra's eyes went distant. We found something deep underground, an old structure, very old, millions of years old. We opened it because we were curious. We should not have. The darkness came out. It took everyone. 2,000 people, gone in 2 days. We are all that is left. Is there a way to stop them? Asked without looking up from her work. Dr. Myra shook her head. We have tried everything. Weapons do not work. The only thing that slows them is light, strong light, but even that only holds them back. It does not destroy them. What about the structure you found? Asked. The place they came from, can it be sealed? Maybe, but the structure is 2 kilometers underground, through tunnels filled with shroud. No one could make it there and back alive. Finished her work and held up a modified weapon. It glowed brighter than any light had seen. She pointed it at the edge of the room where the shroud waited. When she fired, the creatures screamed and pulled back. It works, she said. Not enough to kill them, but enough to hurt them. She looked at. If we modify all our weapons and move fast, we might be able to reach that structure. That is suicide, Dr. Myra said. Shrugged, maybe, but if we do nothing, everyone here dies anyway. And then the shroud spread to other worlds, more colonies, more people. I would rather die trying to stop that than sit here waiting for the lights to fail. Looked at this small human female. She had just said something that warriors of 100 species could not say. She had looked at almost certain death and decided to walk toward it anyway. For the first time in 300 years, felt something he did not recognize. A cold feeling in his crystal chest. A voice in his head that told him to run, to hide, to let someone else handle this. It took him a moment to understand what it was. It was fear. Real fear. The kind that made you want to give up. He watched hand Danny a modified weapon. He watched them check their gear and prepare to walk into the dark. They were afraid too. He could see it in every movement they made. But they were going anyway. Made a decision. He picked up a weapon and held it out too. "Modify this one too," he said. "I am coming with you." They moved the survivors to the colony's power station. It was the only building with enough energy to keep all the lights running at full strength. The shrouds circled outside like hungry animals, pressing against the walls of light, looking for any dark corner to slip through. Stood near a window and watched the darkness move. The creatures had no real shape. They changed constantly, becoming whatever nightmare you feared most. When looked at them, he saw the faces of soldiers he had lost over 300 years. They called to him with voices he remembered. They begged him to come outside. He turned away from the window. His crystal hands were shaking. This was wrong. He was commander. He had faced the Void Swarm at the Battle of Nexus Prime. He had watched his home planet nearly burn during the Fire Wars. Nothing had ever made him shake before. Morgan walked over to him. She carried 2 cups of something warm. She handed one too. He looked at it. "It is called coffee," she said. "Humans drink it when we need to stay alert. I do not know if it works on, but the warmth might help." Took the cup but did not drink. "How do you stay so calm?" he asked. "You have been this way since we landed. The shroud do not seem to affect you the way they affect others." Laugh softly. "Oh, they affect me. Trust me, I am terrified. My heart has not stopped racing since those lights went out. I keep seeing things in the dark. Faces of people I have lost. My father, my best friend from the military academy. The shroud know exactly what frightens me." "Then how do you keep functioning?" Sat down on a metal box and looked up at him. "Commander, how long do you live? Your species, I mean." "I can live for 500 years, sometimes more. Humans live about 80 years, some more, some less. That is it, 80 years and then we are gone forever." She took a sip of her coffee. "We know this from the moment we are old enough to understand death. Every human grows up knowing that our time is very short." Considered this. He had known that humans were short-lived, but he had never really thought about what that meant. "Because our lives are short," continued, "we learn to make choices. Every day we choose what matters to us. We choose what we are willing to risk our brief time for. And when we find something worth dying for, we do not hesitate. Because to a human, dying for something meaningful is better than living for nothing." "But you could run," said. "You could get on the ship and leave this place. You could live." "Yes, I could. And then what? I would live another 50 years knowing that I ran away, knowing that people died because I was too afraid to try. That is not living, Commander. That is just waiting to die slowly." She looked toward where Danny was talking to the survivors. "Courage is not about not being afraid. It is about deciding that something matters more than your fear." Across the room, Danny had gathered a small group around him. The survivors and some of the soldiers listened as he talked, could hear pieces of what he was saying. "Back on Earth," Danny was saying, "there was a fire in a building once. Big fire. The whole thing was coming down, and there were kids trapped on the top floor. You know what the firefighters did? They ran inside, not because they were not scared. They were probably more scared than anyone, but those kids mattered more than their fear." The young soldier looked confused. "Why would anyone run toward danger? That makes no sense." Danny smiled. "Because that is what love does. When you love something, really love it, fear cannot stop you. Those firefighters loved those kids, even though they had never met them. They loved the idea of children being safe, and that love was stronger than any fire." The big warrior clicked his mandibles. "On my world, we are taught to remove emotion from battle. Feelings make you weak." "Maybe," Danny said. "Or maybe feelings are what make you strong. I'm not fighting the shroud because I was ordered to. I am fighting because I care about all of you, because I care about Dr. Myra and her people, because somewhere out there my mom is waiting for me to come home and I want to make her proud." He shrugged. "Feelings are not weakness. Feelings are why we fight at all." listened to this and felt something shift inside his crystal mind. For 300 years he had believed that the best warrior was one who felt nothing. Cold, calculating, untouchable, but maybe he had been wrong. Maybe feeling nothing was not strength. Maybe it was just emptiness. Dr. Myra approached the group with a data pad in her hands. I have been looking at the structure we found. The one where the shroud came from. I think I understand it now. It is a door, a tier between our dimension and theirs. If we can seal it, we can cut off the shroud from their power source. They should weaken and fade. How do we seal it? Asked. I have a device. It creates a focused energy burst that should close the tier, but someone has to carry it to the breach and activate it manually. The radiation from the closure will kill whoever does it. Silence fell over the room. The survivors looked at each other. The soldiers stared at the ground. No one spoke. Stood up, I will go. No, Danny said immediately. Not a chance. You have a family waiting for you, a sister, right, and that nephew you are always talking about. Everyone here has someone waiting for them, said. Stepped forward. I will do it. I have lived 300 years, that is more than enough. Danny shook his head. Commander, we need you to lead. You are the only one with enough experience to get a team through those tunnels. If you die at the start, we all die. Then we need volunteers, said. Who is willing to make the journey? Even if we do not know who will carry the device at the end, we need a team willing to go. Danny raised his hand immediately, raised hers too. After a moment, raised his. The young looked terrified, but he raised a trembling hand anyway. Finally, stood up to his full height and clicked his mandibles in what passed for a nod. 5 of us, said. It will have to be enough. As the team prepared to leave, Danny did something strange. He walked up to each member of the group one by one and hugged them. He hugged for a long time. He hugged gently because the seemed fragile. He even hugged, wrapping his arms around this hard shell. When Danny reached, he paused. Is it okay if I hug you? I know your people might not do that. My people do not touch each other, said. It is considered inappropriate. Danny grinned. Well, we might all die in a few hours. Seems like a good time to try new things. Before could respond, Danny wrapped his arms around the crystal commander. The warmth of the human body seeped into his cold form. It was strange. It was uncomfortable, but somehow it was also comforting. Whatever happens down there, Danny said, pulling back, we are not alone. That matters more than anything. Did not fully understand what Danny meant, but as they walked toward the door that led down into the darkness, he realized he was no longer quite as afraid. The fear was still there, still whispering in his mind. But now there was something else too, something that pushed back against the darkness. He looked at the humans walking beside him, so small, so fragile, so impossibly brave, and he wondered if maybe they knew something about life that his ancient species had forgotten long ago. The tunnels went down into the heart of the moon. They were old, older than the mining colony, older than the coalition itself. The walls were covered in symbols that no one could read, warnings from a civilization that had died millions of years ago. The shroud were thicker down here. They pressed against the team's lights like a living wall of darkness. Led the way with her modified weapon. The bright beam cut through the shadows, making the creatures scream and pull back. But they always returned, always pressed closer, always whispered. Keep moving, she called back to the others. Do not stop, do not listen to them. But it was hard not to listen. The shroud spoke with voices of the dead, heard his brother killed in battle 200 years ago. He heard his first commander, the one who had taught him everything about war. They called his name. They begged him to come to them. They told him that the darkness was peaceful, that he had fought long enough, that it was time to rest. Commander, Danny's voice cut through the whispers. Hey, Commander, what is the capital of your home world? Blinked what? Your home world. What is the capital city called? I have always wanted to know. This is not the time for. Just answer, please. It is called. Is it nice there? What does it look like? Realized what Danny was doing. He was giving something to focus on besides the whispers. It is beautiful, said slowly. The buildings are made of crystal like my body. When the sun rises, the whole city glows with different colors, red and gold and purple. That sounds amazing. I would love to see it someday. The whispers faded a little, kept talking about his home, and Danny kept asking questions, and somehow the darkness seemed a little less heavy. They walked for what felt like hours. The tunnels twisted and turned, going deeper and deeper. Young was struggling. His silver fur had turned gray with fear and his steps were getting slower. Stayed close to him, her free hand on his shoulder guiding him forward. Tell me about your family, she said to him softly. Do you have any siblings? A sister whispered. She just had a baby. I have not met him yet. What is his name? His name is. That is a good name. Tell me about him. What does he look like? Started talking about his nephew and his steps grew steadier. The humans seemed to know exactly what to do. They kept everyone focused on life, on hope, on things worth living for. It pushed back the darkness in a way that weapons could not. They came to a large chamber where the tunnel opened up. The shroud were thick here, filling every shadow, reaching toward them with arms made of nothing. To get to the other side, they would have to cross through the heart of the swarm. We need more light, said. Everyone fire together on my mark, create a path. They lined up and waited, counted down. Then they fired all 5 weapons at once, creating a tunnel of blazing light through the darkness. The shroud screamed and burned and pulled away. Go, shouted, go now. They ran. The light tunnel was closing behind them as the shroud recovered. Crystal legs pounded against the stone floor. He could see the exit ahead, just a few more meters. Stumbled, the big leg caught on something and he went down hard. The shroud were on him instantly, wrapping around his armored body, pulling him into the dark. Danny turned back without hesitating. He grabbed his arm and pulled with all his strength. Come on, get up. But the shroud were too strong. They were dragging down and Danny with him saw what was about to happen. In another second, both of them would be gone. He ran back. He did not think about it. He just moved. His crystal hands closed around Danny's waist and pulled. Was there too, firing her weapon into the mass of shadows. For a long, terrible moment, they were locked in a battle between light and dark. Then let go. The warrior looked up at them with his many eyes. Go, he clicked. I will hold them. The humans taught me something. Fear is not weakness. Running from fear is weakness. I am not running anymore. Before anyone could stop him, pushed them away and threw himself into the swarm. His weapon blazed with light as he fired in all directions. The shroud screamed and burned, focusing all their attention on him. Move, Danny shouted, his voice breaking. Do not let him die for nothing. They ran. Behind them the light of his weapon faded, the screaming stopped, and then there was only silence. The 4 remaining members of the team did not stop until they reached the final chamber, and there it was, the breach. It was a tear in reality itself, a wound in the universe that pulsed with colors that should not exist. Through it, could see the dimension where the shroud came from, endless darkness, infinite hunger, a place where light had never existed and never would. Dr. Myra's device sat heavy in his pack. She pulled it out and looked at it. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were wet with tears for. I will do it, she said quietly. I will take the device in. Danny took the device from her hands. His movements were gentle but firm. No, you will not. Danny. Listen to me. Danny's voice was calm, almost peaceful. You have a family, a sister, a nephew who calls you every week. You have a whole life waiting for you. I have always known I would die young. Everyone in my family does. Heart problems, you know. The doctors said I probably have 10 years left, maybe 15. This is a better death than lying in a hospital bed. That does not mean you have to. Yes, it does, Danny smiled. It was the same warm smile he had worn since the first day on the ship. You asked me once why I make jokes all the time. It is because I have always known my time is short, so I decided to spend every moment being happy. And right now I am happy. I am happy because I get to save the people I care about. He turned to, Commander promised me something. Could not speak. His crystal throat was tight with an emotion he did not recognize. He nodded. Remember what you learned here. Fear is not weakness. Love is not weakness. Tell the other species. Tell them that being afraid is okay. What matters is what you do with that fear, Danny grinned. And take care of, she pretends to be tough but she needs people. Danny please started. Danny hugged her one last time. He whispered something in her ear that made her cry harder. Then he pulled back and looked at all of them. Tell my mom I love her. Tell her I did something good. And then Danny Price, a small human from a small planet, walked into the heart of darkness with a smile on his face. The breach swallowed him. For a moment there was nothing. Then a blinding flash of light erupted from the tier, brighter than any sun. The breach screamed, a sound that shook the very stone around them, and then it closed. The darkness faded. The whispers stopped. The shroud, cut off from their dimension, began to dissolve like shadows at dawn. In minutes they were gone. Stood in the suddenly quiet chamber, watching the last wisps of darkness fade away. Beside him, fell to her knees and wept. He did not know what to do. He had never comforted anyone before. But he remembered Danny's hug, and he knelt down beside the crying human and put his crystal arm around her shoulders. It felt awkward and strange, but it also felt right. They stayed like that for a long time, a 300-year-old alien and a human soldier, united by loss and by something new. Something was only beginning to understand. 6 months had passed since 7. The galaxy had moved on to new problems and new dangers, as it always did, but some things had changed forever. Commander stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Coalition Council on Nexus Prime. The room was massive, filled with representatives from 1,000 different species. They sat in tiered rows that rose toward a ceiling painted with stars. Every eye was on as he prepared to give his report on humanity. He had written a formal document, pages of facts and observations, combat statistics, psychological profiles, everything the council had asked for. But as he looked out at all those faces, he realized that the document did not contain the truth. Not really. Honored members of the council, he began, his stone voice echoing through the chamber. I was asked to evaluate humanity, to determine if they are worthy of full membership in the coalition. I have prepared a detailed report which you have all received, but with your permission, I would like to speak more personally. The council leader, an ancient being of pure energy named Vex, pulsed with light. You may proceed, Commander. Took a deep breath. He was not sure his species could actually breathe, but it felt appropriate. I have lived for 300 years, he said. I have fought in wars that most of you have only read about in history files. I have commanded fleets, watched stars die, and stood on the bones of civilizations. In all that time, I believed I understood courage. I thought bravery was the absence of fear. I thought the greatest warriors were those who felt nothing when facing death. He paused and looked around the chamber. I was wrong. A murmur went through the council, continued. On 7, I served with 2 humans, Lieutenant Morgan and Sergeant Danny Price. They were young. Their entire species has only been traveling the stars for 15 years. They live barely 80 years, a blink compared to most of us here. Many of you see them as children, fragile, unimportant. But on 7, I watched those 2 humans face the shroud. Yes, the shroud. The enemy we thought was gone forever. They have returned, and it was humans who stopped them. More murmurs. Several council members leaned forward in surprise. The shroud did not affect the humans the way they affected us, said. Do not misunderstand me. The humans were afraid. more afraid than I have ever seen anyone be. But they did not let that fear stop them. They kept fighting. They kept thinking. They kept caring about others even when the darkness was trying to consume their minds. I asked one of them how they did it, how they functioned while being so clearly terrified, and she told me something I will never forget. She said that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that something matters more than your fear. Crystal eyes found Morgan in the audience. She sat in the front row, wearing a new uniform with a commander's insignia. Danny's dog tags hung around her neck. She gave him a small nod. Sergeant Danny Price died on 7, said. His voice grew softer. He walked into the heart of the Shroud's dimension carrying a device that would seal the breach between our worlds. He knew he would not survive. He did it anyway, not because he was not afraid. He was terrified. I could see it in his eyes, but he loved his friends. He loved strangers he had never met. He loved the idea of people being safe, and that love was stronger than his fear. Before he died, he hugged me. My species does not touch each other. We consider it inappropriate. But Danny Price wrapped his arms around me and told me that I was not alone. And in that moment, standing at the edge of darkness, I understood something that 300 years of war never taught me. His voice cracked slightly. He did not know his voice could do that. Connection is not weakness. Feeling is not weakness. Love is not weakness. These things are what make us strong. They are what give us reasons to fight. Without them, we are just machines made of flesh and crystal, going through the motions of life without actually living. Humans know this. They have always known this. Because they live such brief lives, they treasure every moment. They form bonds quickly because they know their time is short. They love deeply because they know they will not love forever. And when they find something worth dying for, they do not hesitate. Because to a human, a meaningful death is better than an empty life. On 7, I felt fear for the first time in my very long life. True fear. The kind that makes you want to give up and surrender to the darkness. And it was humans who showed me what to do with that fear. They taught me that fear is not a flaw. It is a fire. It can burn you down or it can forge you into something stronger. The choice is yours. Straightened his crystal body and looked directly at the council. You asked me to evaluate humanity. Here is my evaluation. They are young, they are fragile, they are brief, and they are the bravest species I have ever encountered. I recommend full membership in the coalition. More than that, I recommend that we learn from them, because they understand something about life that many of us have forgotten. He stepped back from the podium. The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, Council Leader Vex pulsed with bright light. We will vote, Vex announced. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Coalition. The chamber erupted in discussion and movement as representatives began talking among themselves about what this meant. Made his way down to where sat. She stood up as he approached, and they looked at each other for a moment. Two survivors of a nightmare that had changed them both forever. That was a good speech, said quietly. Danny would have liked it. I meant every word. I know you did. She touched the dog tags around her neck. His mother asked me to give you something. She said that anyone who spoke of her son that way deserved to have a piece of him. Pulled out a small metal disc. It was one of Danny's personal items, a coin from Earth that he had always carried for luck. She pressed it into his crystal palm. He called it his lucky quarter, said. He would flip it whenever he had to make a hard decision. He said the coin never told him what to do. It just gave him time to figure out what he really wanted. Looked at the small piece of metal. It was worthless by any standard measure, but holding it, he felt Danny's warmth again. He felt that hug in the darkness. He felt connected to something beyond himself. Thank you, he said. I will keep it always. They walked together toward the great windows that looked out on the stars. The galaxy spread before them, vast and ancient and full of dangers, but also full of hope, full of life, full of beings learning to reach across the void and touch each other. "Are you really still afraid?" asked after a while. "Even now after everything?" "Yes," admitted. "I think I always will be now. Fear has become part of me." "Does it bother you?" Considered the question. 6 months ago he would have said yes, fear was a flaw, a weakness to be removed, but now he understood differently. "No," he said finally. "The fear reminds me that I am alive, that things matter, that I have something to lose. For 300 years I had nothing to fear because I had nothing I truly cared about. Now I have friends, connections, purpose. And yes, that means I have fear, but I would not trade it for anything." Smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her since Danny died. "That is very human of you, Commander. I will take that as a compliment." "It is." They stood together watching the stars, a human and an alien, united by loss and love and the strange courage that came from knowing fear. The galaxy was changing. Humanity had arrived, and they had brought their light with them. A light that came not from the absence of darkness, but from the choice to shine anyway. Somewhere out there, Danny Price would have been proud. His sacrifice had not just saved a colony. It had changed how an ancient species understood the universe. It had proven that even the shortest lives could have the greatest meaning. It had shown that fear and love were not opposites, but partners in the dance of being alive. And as held the lucky quarter in his crystal hand, he made a silent promise to carry that light forward, to feel the fear and do it anyway, to love deeply even knowing that loss would follow, to be, in his own way, a little bit human. It was, he realized, the greatest gift anyone had ever given him. The end.